pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
While the Missouri legislature deadlocked over issues related to secession, the governor and his friends conspired to divert money illegally from the banks to arm rebel military units then forming throughout the state to take Missouri out of the Union by force, if necessary. The banks would extend short-term financing, since no one expected a long war. The way the plan went, after the nation had split and things had settled down, the new Missouri Confederate state government would sell bonds to repay the banks. Nearly all of Missouri's bankers favored secession and were ready to cooperate. The plan was sound, too. The governor of Alabama had financed that state's militia in just the same way some months earlier. The difference was that in Alabama, the governor's course of action had broad popular support. The Missourians had to work in secret. But fighting broke out in St. Louis and in Boonville in May and June of 1861 before the conspirators could move the money. Federal forces overturned the Missouri state government and chased the governor down to Arkansas. After that, the St. Louis bankers could do nothing to help the rebels because the city was under tight federal control. Federal authority did not extend, however, into the interior of the state. There, I found, some 30 branch banks paid out their money in return for thousands of promissory notes signed by local, wealthy, pro-Confederate citizens, usually the bankers' own relatives. This was risky business by any normal standard. These were unsecured loans for large sums compared to the signer's own assets. But the men who signed these notes did not think they would ever have to repay the money, nor did the bankers think so. Missouri's Confederate government in exile pledged repeatedly to repay any debts incurred for the defense of the state, as they termed it. The larger Confederate government made the same guarantee. So the rebels got the bank's money after all, about $3 million worth, equivalent to $75 million in 2009. But it was a poisoned victory. Union forces managed to hold the state, and the South lost the war. As federal troops gradually regained control of the countryside and smaller towns, they purged the pro-Confederate bankers from their positions and replaced them with Union men. Starting in early 1862, these Union-controlled banks filed lawsuits in the civil courts to recover these by now defaulted loans. These are the lawsuits, over 2,900 of them statewide, that I first noticed in the Cooper County Circuit Court records. I eventually found these lawsuits in 40 counties, over a third of the state, an area the size of West Virginia. The lawsuits marked a turning point. The wealthy Missourians who signed these notes had, in effect, loaned money to a Confederate Missouri state government that did not yet exist and that now never would. Now, instead of compensable war claims, these notes represented private debts for which the signers were personally liable. By 1862 and later, these men had no liquid assets left. They hadn't been able to farm for at least a year. Their slaves were running off to join the Union Army, and the federal authorities had imposed fines, assessments, and bonds on pro-Confederate civilians. But the signers still owned land, and that is what they lost in the lawsuits. As I mentioned earlier, most of the defaulted notes had multiple signers, usually 2, sometimes 3, occasionally more. For a long time, it was unclear to me why the people who signed these notes chose the specific co-signers that they did, instead of other people. Eventually, after exploring several other possibilities, I found that ties of family connected the co-signers to one another and to the bankers as well. By modern American standards, many of these connections were distant, though they were clearly important to the people involved. The groupings of co-signers were, I found, only a tiny glimpse of the extended family networks that connected these people. The bankers and signers were bound by family alliances already generations old by 1861, often dating to the pre-revolutionary Southern Tidewater region and surviving multiple migrations into Missouri. These lawsuits, therefore, were not evenly distributed among pro-Confederate Missourians. Instead, the lawsuits disproportionately affected the network of elite families, the planters and their dependents, and their relatives, the bankers. As a direct result of the lawsuits, eventually nearly 350,000 acres of land went under the sheriff's hammer. But damage from the lawsuits probably extended beyond the original borrowers. There were no bankruptcy laws then, state or federal, that could have scheduled an orderly payment of debts. One objective of modern bankruptcy law is to forestall a chain reaction of further bankruptcies. Otherwise, anyone facing a sheriff's auction would mercilessly hound his own debtors, if he had any. The absence of a bankruptcy law meant that insolvency could spread from house to house like a fire. The leading family's economic, social, and kinship relations were so intertwined that whole extended family networks went down at once. As a result, today Missouri has an insignificant Southern-descended rural gentry compared to other former slave states. Because of this catastrophe, Missouri's planters lost more than their counterparts in the Confederacy proper. There, former planters managed to keep their land after the war, but the Missourians did not. Also, the plantation system itself survived the war, but in Missouri it did not. Not all the Missourians accepted this new order quietly. Many younger sons of these ruined families joined the guerrilla bands that marauded through the state. Missouri would have experienced guerrilla violence anyway. All the border states did. But the extra recruits who joined the guerrillas because of the indebtedness and land sales pushed the violence in Missouri over the top. The state became the site of the bloodiest and longest guerrilla insurgency ever to occur on American soil. Putting the events in Missouri into context, I found that in 1861, communities all over the country, north and south, were using the same grassroots financing to arm their young men that I discovered in Missouri. In that era, no government, national or state, had the money, the administrative capacity, or the legal authority to mobilize for a major war. Instead, both hostile sections armed in the way the United States had in all its previous conflicts, through local action and private contributions. As eccentric as the system seems now, it was consistent with the prevailing prejudice against standing armies and all that comes with them. But only short, low-tech conflicts can be supplied in this way. Private citizens and organizations can equip troops initially, but they can't support them in the field during an extended campaign. Both the U.S. and the Confederate War Departments knew this, and from early in the war took steps to rationalize logistics and financing. By late 1862, both sides had switched to more modern methods of military supply. Until the end of the war, however, private organizations played a more important role in military support than they do now. But never again did the United States rely on private initiatives for military mobilization.
You can see the writing on the pavement. Young kids, they're growing up in basements. Online, a whole new generation. I'ma make mine, so you better go take it. Always, they need a new replacement. Decentralized, can't contain it. We're changing lives, yeah, upgrading. Call it suicide of the older generation.
What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong.
Hey, it's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive, and save it.
What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah.